Thanks very much, Louisa. Just a quick show of hands. How many school food service directors or school food personnel do we have in the audience? So quite a few. So a lot of this will be no surprise to you. The rest of it is going to be hopefully illuminating for folks in the room about some of the challenges and hurdles for improving food in public schools. I would like to give a little bump to the Harvard Food Law Policy Clinic. One other thing that you can do is look at campaign finance reform, because that is the root of a lot of these issues. And maybe we need Bernie Sanders to roll back Colonel Sanders. All right. So I'd like everybody to put on their entrepreneurship hat and imagine an industry that you're going to start a business in where your market size is fixed, where your retail operations can only be open for a few hours a day, where your product is regulated by the government, your pricing is capped, your input costs are tied up and tied to external markets that are unregulated, you have limited purchasing power, you have limited funding for capital improvements, your brand carries historical baggage in the marketplace, your customers are demanding, your management decisions are scrutinized by an underinformed public. Okay? And most importantly, your responsibility is basically the health of America's kids. So no small amount of responsibility there, right? Who wants that job? So we demand a lot of our school food, right? We demand high quality. We demand fast. We want it convenient. We want it to be inexpensive. We want it accessible to everybody. We want a great value. That's school food nirvana. The question is, the old project management mantra is, if you want it fast, cheap, and good, pick any two. We can do that for you. Okay? And I would ask the audience, what is high quality? We're talking about good food, and I hear that all over the country. But I have not heard, well, Chef Ann did a pretty good job articulating some of the finer points of it, but I think we all have different values when it comes to food and what high quality is. For somebody, food safety is high quality. For others, it's fresh. For others, it's local. For others, it's sustainable, which is not synonymous with local, by the way. So we should be thinking about that. How fast do we need our food, and why fast again?
Because they only have 20 minutes.
That's right. That's right. So maybe we need to look at that. And then inexpensive, and that's inexpensive for whom? School meals are an important safety net for America's kids. So just a little bit on overall volume in the country on school meals. 7.45 billion meals served last year. Okay. The National School Lunch Program is the bulk of that. Summer breakfast is up. You can see that that's growing over time. That's been a great push nationally and here in Massachusetts as well. And then Summer Food Service Program is a small piece of that. If you look historically since 1980, the mix of the kids that are receiving subsidized lunches has really shifted. The balance has shifted towards kids that are qualifying for free and reduced. And you'll notice that uptick in 2008, that's the recession. It's also a result of increased outreach. But the important takeaway here is that these meals are critical for low-income kids. And I look around the room and just to be honest, I don't see a lot of diversity. A lot of the kids that are in need of these meals, they're not represented in this room except by the food service directors. And we need to engage more people in communities of color around the country in this conversation. So federal spending on nutrition education. We spend a lot on school food, $20.5 billion. That's a lot of money. But now when you compare it to the defense budget, okay? So we need to, and Chef Ann did a great job of setting us straight on this. We need to rethink our priorities. So in any business, now to the good stuff, right? In any business, the key formula is revenue minus expenses equals net income. In school food, it's a little more complex than that. Revenue, and I'm going to dive in each of these pieces. Revenue is it's a function of your compliance with USDA regulations. You don't meet the regs, you don't get your reimbursement. It's a function of your district size. How many kids can you serve on a daily basis? It's a function of average daily attendance. If kids aren't in school, they're not buying your meals. The participation rate needs to be taken into account. If folks don't know what participation is, it's sales. And then the offerings that you serve. Do you do breakfast? Do you do breakfast after the bell? Do you do a la carte? And what is your eligibility mix? How many free kids qualify for that higher reimbursement? How many full pay kids do you have? Revenue comes in two forms. It comes in cash through reimbursements, which we talked a little bit about, and I'll talk about levels in a second. It comes in through a la carte sales, which is additional food. Some call it competitive foods. And then some schools do some catering and other small pieces to augment their sales. Food also comes in-kind donations from the federal government. This is what used to be called commodity foods, or they're actually USDA foods now. And that's actual food from the government. So in terms of revenue and the reimbursements, and this is a very complex calculus for a lot of districts, and I tried to simplify it here. It's still complex. But basically, the maximum that you can get for lunch, more or less, is about $3.12 a lunch for a full, free, eligible kid in a high-needs district. Okay? If you're not in a high-needs district with more than 60% free reduced, that's like $3.10. Breakfast is lower, and then snack is just a little bit. Even the full-pay kids do get a reimbursement. You'll see that's just 28 cents, 30 cents. So we're working within really constricted revenue targets here. Okay? In terms of the in-kind product that schools get from the USDA, it is based on your previous year's lunch participation times a multiple set by the government and tied to the consumer price index. So right now, basically, it's about a quarter times the number of lunches that you served last year. So for instance, a district of 4,000 students that served 3,000 lunches would be eligible next year for about $130,000 in product that is ordered from the government. Okay? That can be lightly processed product, which comes in raw. It doesn't come in alive. It could be diverted also to be turned into value-added products. This is how chicken nuggets and pizza end up on the school food plate. And then there are also bonus commodities, which are often available and can enhance entitlement levels. Massachusetts does a very good job with bonus commodities. Our utilization rates here in Massachusetts historically weren't great, and they've improved to a great extent over the last couple of years. And we're actually beating the national average on that. So I mentioned a la carte sales. These are revenue drivers in the schools. And even in poor schools, you will see this stuff served because it can add to the bottom line. Okay, and so school food is a really big business. So let's talk a little bit about expenses. School food expenses, the big three are food and supplies costs, labor, and infrastructure. But your program structure, whether or not you outsource to a management company or you use a vendor, is a big piece of your expenses, good or bad. And how you run your district and how you manage cost controls can have a huge impact on expenses. In terms of food expenses, there's a lot to consider here, and I'm just going to throw a few out there. There's an entire presentation that can be done on food expenses and the market. But basically, you've got external seasonal market forces at work here. You've got customer preferences. This is kids saying, I would rather have French fries than broccoli. You've got canned, frozen, or fresh to choose amongst. You've got quality that you need to take into account. Whether or not you contract with a management company that can leverage buying power from a national or international scale, or whether or not you join with a purchasing collaborative with other school districts can greatly influence your costs. Your equipment and inventory needs to be considered when you're buying your food. Do you have the storage for the type of food you're buying and for the capacity in which you want to buy it? Volume can lower your prices, but not if you can't store it and not if it goes bad while it's sitting on your shelves. Okay? Just a quick piece on FIFO and LIFO for the accounting geeks in the room. It's first in, first out, or last in, first out. You don't want to do LIFO in food, but you would be appalled at how many schools actually do. Stuff goes in the back of the freezer, and you don't see it until the spring. Okay? That costs money, and it comes off the school plate. Preparation considerations. Are we going to do heat and serve versus scratch or some hybrid light scratch? You need to consider your labor time and your training costs there, also your equipment. So the new federal guidelines for school lunches and breakfasts have done some important things around food cost. They've set sodium reduction targets. We now have mandated required vegetable or fruit every day. Used to have to be offered but not taken. Now it has to be taken. So now you've actually got you've got a cost that's guaranteed to be on the plate every day. And in milk, non-fat chocolate milk only. So food costs drive your menu decisions. Just as an example for vegetables, you do have to serve a rainbow of flavors now, but you have to serve a minimum of those, and then the rest of the menu is up to you. You can serve starches, you can serve celery, or you can serve really nutrient-dense spinach. The question is, what are you going to menu the rest of the time when you look at food costs? These are actual food costs tied to a purchasing collaborative pricing list here in Massachusetts. What would you menu if you were managing to budget? What are the kids going to not complain about? Okay. When you're thinking about breakfast, what are you going to menu for breakfast? Are you going to menu a whole grain bagel with an egg patty, fresh apple, and a white milk? Or are you going to put a trick cereal bar on there because it's easy and you can hand it out quickly? It really adds up over the course of a year. So labor is the next big chunk of expenses. As Chef Ann mentioned, it can be more than 50% of your budget. But it really comes down to, this is what drives quality in school food. The key metric is meals per labor hour. Breakfasts and lunches are not created equal. There's a formula there. Snacks are not created equal to lunches, so there's a formula there. But basically, higher meals per labor hour, higher efficiency. Okay? What you have the pushback on that with is the labor unions, because they're not interested in working any harder than they have to. Okay? So that's a real tension. And it's a driver of cost. So everybody in your municipality, if you're thinking about improving the quality of the meals, investigate the collective bargaining practices of the district. Tenure of school food staff. Chef Ann mentioned, some are 30, 35 years. I know in some larger districts here in Massachusetts, that's, those are spring chickens in comparison to some folks that have been in the district. And those costs rise over time. Folks get cost of living increases. And so when you're doing a $10, $15 an hour job, to be fair, with a living wage, if you're making $30 an hour for that job, your efficiency hasn't increased. And one could argue that your ability to prepare better meals has capped at some point. So what are we paying for there? And then there's training and culture. Culture is probably one of the hardest to articulate in financial terms, but probably one of the most important in terms of driving school food improvements. Do people show up with a smile on their face, ready to serve kids healthy food? Service with a smile. By the way, there's great literature on verbal prompts. Kids will actually take more healthy food if it's served with a smile. That's and I don't know if the research has been done, but I've got to imagine that service with a scowl has the opposite effect. Like, here, kid, Michelle Obama's making me do this, right? So the last big piece is infrastructure, okay? Physical building constraints drive your equipment choices. If you have a school that doesn't have the equipment, proper power outlets or gas lines or space, you might end up with the thing on the right there, which is a retherm oven, and that is the kitchen in a lot of schools, right? For 90% of the elementary schools in Boston, that is the kitchen in their school. Okay? So there's some real constraints that the management in Boston has to deal with when trying to serve 20-some-odd thousand kids. So management structure is the last piece. And we're all the food service directors here, by and large, are probably self-op districts, self-operated districts, where there is no external management company working with them to improve the efficiency of the food or leverage buying power and so forth. Then you have a vended model, which is partially what you have in places like Lynn and in Boston and in others, where some of the schools require satellite meals, and they come in prepackaged. And then there's food service management companies. There are 3 big ones I'll talk about, and a couple of regional players as well. They'll come in and they'll run the operation for you. And then there's a hybrid model, some where there's a management company and a vended option, some where there's a self-op and a vended option. Okay. So processed vended meals meet the letter of the law, but the question is, do they really meet the spirit of what we're trying to do? So on the left, that's a real meal. That is an actual menued meal from Lynn, from May, from the elementary schools. Ms. Tater Tots there. A cookie to make sure they met the calorie minimums. And on the right is I had to do some nutritional contortions to get there, but that's an actual McDonald's meal that meets the school food guidelines. Okay? It has the same calories as the meal on the left. School food convenience is huge business. And we can make fast food that meets the guidelines. You know, the science is there, you know, to cram the nutrients into a slice of pizza. But the real question is, when the kids leave the school and they go to the Domino's Pizza on the corner, because they've been taught that Domino's Pizza is healthy food, what do they get? They don't get the school food compliant meal, and they can't tell the difference. Could you? So in terms of management structure and management companies, there are 3 big players. There's Aramark, there's Compass, which is Chartwell's in most K-12 schools, and then there's Sodexo. These are all international companies, all quite large. In Massachusetts, about 30%, give or take, of students are served by a management company. And there are numerous regional players. Here in New England, we have a company called Whitson's, which is a competitor. And the promise, and then on the vended meal front, we have, you know, there's 2 national companies, or maybe 1 or 2 others, but the 2 big ones are Preferred Meal Systems and then Revolution Foods, which I believe is here today. And so these companies give you a value proposition. They say, you know, we can save you money, we can drive revenues, we can give you more net profits to reinvest in your program. And so the promise is basically, you know, experts are going to come in and they're going to help you raise revenue. And they're going to lower your costs. You're going to lower your food costs, you're going to lower your labor costs, you're going to lower your equipment costs. But they're going to take a fee for that. And on net, if you're losing money now, they may be able to extract their fee and improve your operation. The question is, you know, if it's close, have you gotten what you're asking for, right, and what you're paying for? Would that management fee be better spent offsetting that loss if you're close? So it's a real tight calculation that should be considered when you're thinking about outsourcing or using vended meals. So when you're deciding, you should have clear, measurable goals. That's the first thing. What are we trying to do with the meals? Where are we today, and where do we want to go? And not, you know, qualitative, I want better food, but measurable goals that folks can be held accountable to and can be contracted for. Okay? Engage in a rigorous RFP process, which is a request for proposal, so that the management companies and vendors that are applying know exactly what's going to be expected of them. Nobody likes to have the game changed on them midstream because a parent activist group showed up and said, we don't like this meal that you're serving to our kids. Well, you know, they're serving what they agreed to serve. And the school negotiated that contract. It's not the management company's fault. School negotiated that contract, and these companies are living up to their contracts. Now, that said, we as responsible citizens need to make sure that we're holding companies that we're entrusting the health of our kids to accountable to the agreements that they have signed on the dotted line for. So I'm going to leave you with just a couple of closing thoughts before I turn it over to Donna. Business complexities often incentivize different sets of behaviors. And given the cost constraints and all the logistical constraints of school food, what we basically have is a system that focuses school food service directors on three big things: maintaining compliance with regulations, minimizing complaints, and maximizing revenues and minimizing costs. And that drives behaviors around the menu and around equipment and around management decisions. And so as we think about trying to change the system, we need to think about what behaviors we're incentivizing with the policies that we set. So all that leads to what ends up back in the bank for reinvestment in the program, and that's where the improvements come. So with that, I will leave it to Donna. Thank you.